First, I would like to thank Sainek's for this invitation. This is the third time that I have actually visited Korea at the invitation of Sainek's. And like Young Kim said, we have been working together for about a decade. I have to say, as a compliment to your country, almost all of my most interesting projects come through Sainek's and out of Korea. You guys have really done a wonderful job of taking technology and finding reasons for it, and reasons that help everybody. So I always appreciate both coming here to the beautiful country and eating the amazing food, but also all of the projects that I get to work on through the Sainek's organization. So thank you very much. As Ms. Kim explained, my name is Meredith. For a lot of you, that's a difficult name, so I do go by Price, which is my middle name, if that's a little bit easier. You can also always just reach out to Sainek's and tell them that you're looking for the shorter of the American presenters, the one wearing the bow tie, and they will know exactly how to find me at all times. I am a biomedical engineer. I have been in medical devices for about 27 years since I graduated. I also have a master's degree in entrepreneurship. I did this because I wanted to focus on small businesses and getting startup companies through exit, through sale, or through becoming a large organization, whatever their choice is. So that includes a lot of business decisions. As she said, I am working on my law degree. I have a focus of intellectual property and patents. I hope to help companies with their patent strategy to, again, add value to the organization through both regulatory and patent work. I am a certified regulatory associate and a qualified auditor. Empirical Technologies is our parent company. We do mechanical testing of orthopedic devices at the headquarters in Colorado Springs. I run the consulting group. I started the consulting group about 13 or 14 years ago because I was a client of Empirical. And I was so happy with the work and the customer service that they did that I called up the owner and I said, I have this great idea. I think you could help more companies get further by adding all of these other services. And so we got together and we started Empirical consulting aspect about 12 years ago or 11 years ago. Just as a very quick overview, I am very passionate about medical devices. I could stand here for 3 hours and talk to you until you fall asleep just myself. So I do have to try to keep it short. But again, if you have any questions or you would like to talk, please feel free to reach out to me through Sainek's. So Class 1, these devices in the US do not require any sort of submission to the FDA. Examples of these, our most common example is going to be instruments, bandages, any of those types of things that are very low risk. These require only registration and listing. I will point out that that is not free, and we will get to that here in a second. So it's not cheap to be in the US market, but as we've discussed already, it is an extremely large market, and there is value in it. Class 2 devices, these are the ones that require 510K, generally speaking, and generally do not require clinical trials. This is where I do the most of my work. This includes spinal implants, bone plates, hips, knees, cranial plating, dental implants, a lot of software as medical device. The majority of the number of devices that come into the US fall within this category. As you can imagine, it is a lot cheaper to do a 510K than it is to go through a clinical trial and go through the PMA process, which is what's required for Class 3. And then the de novo process is one where there is no perfect fit at the moment. If a new device is coming into the US market, it is assumed to be Class 3 and require clinical data unless there's a reason why it should not be. And that's what the de novo process allows you to do, is come in with a brand new product and prove that it should be class 2 preferably. And if not, then it allows you to have at least a PMA product with a product code. We at Empirical don't deal with a lot of PMA work. We don't deal with the clinical aspects. We will help with any of the pre-PMA testing and submissions that are needed. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about cost. The FDA has increased their costs or their fees for everything, and some of it is significant. The annual fee currently, if you want to sell even a bandage in the United States, is about $6,500 per year. You do not have to pay for every device that you register, but you do have to pay that flat fee to register your company. You will, of course, require a U.S. agent as well, which we'll get to in just a minute. A 510K, you'll notice that there are two prices there. One is about $20,000, and one is about $5,000. That is the fee that you pay to the FDA. The difference between $20,000 and $5,000 is that you have proven you're a small business. And I think it's funny that they define a small business as 100 million US dollars a year in revenue or less. So I imagine most of you in this room would qualify for small business exemption. I highly recommend that no matter what you're doing in the US, you go ahead and get that SBE, as we call it, as quickly as possible, because it will sometimes take as much as 3 months to get that number after you have supplied all of your tax information. A PMA, same thing as you can see, it's about $440,000 for the FDA fee if you are not a small business, and that goes down to $110,000 if you are. And then de novo, a $131,000 fee and a $33,000 fee. So again, I just wanted to get you an idea of how much the fees are, as well as the absolute importance of getting that small business exemption. So the registration is required for anybody who is going to distribute medical devices or manufacture medical devices in the United States. There's a list here of people who qualify. Obviously, if you need help with that, please reach out to us. It's not a difficult process at all. It's all done on a portal, and you just create a login, and you go in and register. It is important that you register as the right entity, whether you're a manufacturer or a contract manufacturer, for example, because once you register, that is when the FDA determines when they will come audit you and what they will be auditing. So U.S. agent, we do offer this service through Empirical. And the reason for that is because we have run into many companies who've had a problem with, they either have designated a family member or they have designated a distributor as their U.S. agent. And that comes into a lot of problems because those people don't know what they need to do with the FDA, how to interface with the FDA. Additionally, on the same note, you, as the manufacturer or the specification developer, you want to own your registration and you want to own your 510K. Another problem we see a lot is that foreign companies will allow their American entity or their American distributor to file their 510K and own that 510K, so to speak. And then if there's a problem between the company and the distributor, the company now no longer has the right to distribute its own product in the United States. So before you enter into the US market, partnerships are very important, and having a U.S. agent who is a regulatory expert is also important. This is in big part to protect you. I would say at least once a year, I have to do a 510K for a foreign company because their distributor or their American entity has basically stolen their product, and they now have to do a 510K for their own product again and pay all the fees again because of problems of falling out with their distributors. The responsibilities of the U.S. agent are simple in that you are responsible for communicating with the FDA on behalf of the foreign entity. The U.S. agent does not handle complaints or any of the other post-market activities. That is the responsibility of the manufacturer in Korea, for example. But the U.S. agent does need to understand what communications need to be made and what filings need to be made as well. These are, again, more responsibilities. Your U.S. agent will help with scheduling the audit that you would have here in Korea, as well as, depending on the activities in the U.S., whatever activities happen there as well. Coordinating that FDA audit is very important. You don't want to, and I have seen this as well, the FDA shows up to the foreign company and the U.S. agent did not see the email or did not hear the phone or something, and they never communicated to the foreign company that the FDA was going to show up. And that puts you in a very hard position to have to look at the FDA and not know that they're coming or even why they're there. The customs process it's a little bit more difficult than just if you have a U.S. entity that's there, but it is very important. There's a guidance document that talks about everything that you need to have as far as labeling, importation, exporter registrations. It's in itself its own entity. If you need some assistance with that, again, please reach out to Sainex, because there are organizations that specialize in importation. And if you're going to be doing a PMA or a clinical trial in the United States, there are special rules that are associated with that, and your CRO needs to be the one who is working directly with you on all of the labeling requirements for investigational devices. So the sponsor of an IDE is a individual device exemption. This is what you need to have in order to do a clinical trial in the U.S. You start with that, and then you go to PMA. That sponsor must be located in the U.S. Again, this is a situation where you're going to need a very good partnership, and Sainex has good partners. They also have their own CRO here as well, so they can assist with all of that communication. I would highly recommend that you stick with experts on that. For example, don't call me. I'm not a CRO. I will probably point you to Shannon and say, please call her. So 510K ownership. It's not technically called ownership, but that's the easiest word to describe it. The manufacturer should submit the 510K. Your name should be the one that is on the document that gets submitted, not your distributor, not your U.S. agent, your 510K. You can label the devices as distributed by whoever your U.S. distributor or agent is, or your importer is. But you want that product to have your name on it, and you want to have the permission to sell it in the United States. Do not give that to someone else. Again, I see this all of the time, and it breaks my heart, because if you're the one that's doing the work, you're the one that deserves to have the device, have the credit, and make the money from it. The 510K holder, which in this case would be, for example, the company here, is responsible for all of the design controls as well as the manufacturing, post-market surveillance. You need a quality system that is compliant with 21 CFR 820, the FDA regulation, which will be harmonizing with ISO 13485 in the near future. But you will have to be the one who owns that information. You can outsource some of the activities, and I would recommend you outsource the activities to, let's say, a company in the US, but you are still responsible for all of the quality. Do not walk away from your responsibility, because it will be a problem if the FDA comes in and starts asking you questions. Two companies cannot own the same 510K. If you have two companies that want to, for example, there's a manufacturer in Korea, and there are two US companies that want to distribute or own the 510K or the rights to distribute that. They will each need their own 510K in their own name. The exception to this is licensing agreements, but you still run into the situation where the manufacturer who has the 510K must be listed as the manufacturer on the product, and then you go back to being distributed by or licensed by. These are some complicated business contracts that you would want to have set up by someone who's familiar with distribution and international contracts. It's again, I can't tell you how often I have a situation where I have to do repeat 510Ks for companies because their contracts were not put in place correctly. So please be careful of that. De novo submissions. These have been fairly popular in the last few years, particularly for things like AI. AI is new for the United States more so than it is here. Once a de novo has gone through, if your device or your product is very similar to that de novo, it is possible you have to do a 510K, not a de novo. The details of each project need to be evaluated to determine if that's possible. But a mistake that is often made is people assume if the previous product similar to yours did a de novo, then you also have to do that. And that's not true. If the outcome from the de novo is that it was designated as Class 2 and given a 510K pathway, then you only have to do a 510K. So the de novo process is, it's one that is very beneficial, but it is also one that is a little complicated. We do not, at Empirical, we do not do a lot of de novos. We do support work for them. And that's partly because it is a bit of an expertise issue. The AI devices, and here you probably can't see it comfortably, but the list of AI devices that have been recently cleared is included here. And you can see that all of those listed are 510Ks. Below that, older submissions, those are de novos, but there are 510Ks that are being issued for AI. There is a particular website at the FDA for going to look at all of the AI devices. I would recommend that if you have one and you're interested in getting into the US market, that you go to that website. It has links to all of the guidance documents, and it tells you all of the current ones that are available in the US. This will help you lay out your strategy moving toward the US market. IVDs. This is something that has become more and more common. Of course, with the COVID pandemic, we have seen a lot more of this coming through. IVDs follow a very similar path to medical devices. They have Class 1, Class 2, and Class 3. The definitions are very similar. Q submissions or pre-submissions, depending on how you want to call them, are often recommended for IVDs, unless they're a very normal, traditional type of IVD. This is because that market is currently changing. The funding that went into IVDs around the pandemic has added to the available resources that the FDA has to get some of those things through the market. There are also special guidances related to NGS and some of the other aspects of IVD that are important in the new technologies that you as a country are much more advanced in than the US is currently. Again, I would recommend take a look at the FDA database specific to IVDs, and you'll find that there are some pretty easy pathways that have been laid out recently. The CLIA database is also part of the IVD process, and using CLIA certified labs, that is a very important aspect of any IVD. I have run into a lot of situations with foreign entities where they have gone through extensive testing or set up the information and everything that they need at a foreign test lab and have not gone through the process that is necessary to get a laboratory certified. This can put a stop on your project quickly. There's also an amount of time that's required to go through the process to get CLIA certified. So make sure that you at the beginning of your project can plan for that as part of your project timeline. The Breakthrough Device Designation Program is something that we have used fairly extensively since it's become available. I do recommend it in a lot of situations where it is applicable. We're going to go through that briefly, as well as what's called the STEP program, Safer Technologies. The EUA, Emergency Use Authorization, it exists, but I would not recommend that you hang your hat on that anymore. Those things are going away. A lot of things that had EUA clearance or authorization are now moving to 510K, or they're pulling out of the U.S. market. There's not a lot of good pathways for EUA anymore in the U.S. The Safety and Performance-Based Pathway is a newer program. It's so far, a lot of it is designated toward the orthopedics, but they are starting to add new categories as well. Then, obviously, Q submission meetings. These can be very valuable. It allows you to get good information from the FDA at the start of your project. We're going to go through each of these together. And then the last thing I will touch on is what's called eStar. It is the Electronic Submission Template and Resource. This is basically an Adobe PDF document that guides you through the process of creating whatever your submission is. It also allows you to submit entirely electronically now, as of a couple months ago, instead of having to mail a printed copy into the FDA. It has streamlined a lot of the submissions, but there's a learning curve to getting used to that submission type. So, Breakthrough Device Designation, BDD. This is something that the FDA put in place poorly and then has now improved. Empirical, we've done 3 of these submissions, and we have successfully gotten that designation. What this does, importantly, is it takes anytime you submit to the FDA, anytime moving forward for that project, you reference the BDD number, and they put you at the top of the list. So if you submit a 510K and your submission is number 25 on that reviewer's list, they take your submission and they start with it first. We have gotten 510Ks cleared in about 20 days instead of 90 days because we have gone through and gotten this BDD. And that carries on to all of future submissions. Q submissions, we can get in front of the FDA in 21 days instead of 70 days. If your product qualifies for BDD, it is free to submit and request. So there is value in getting in front of the FDA faster. Let's see. Okay, here we go. So in order to get a BDD, there are 2 things that you have to prove. The first relates to the clinical disease or condition that you are treating. That disease or condition has to be either life-threatening or debilitating. Now, this is not difficult to prove with a lot of the things that we do. Cancer is debilitating, life-threatening. COVID is debilitating and life-threatening. Spinal conditions, debilitating and life-threatening. So it is possible we wouldn't be creating this device if it weren't going to treat something debilitating, generally speaking. And then after you prove that, you have to prove one of the following: that it is a breakthrough technology, that it is something different than what's out there already, that there is no available alternative to treat that condition, that there is a significant advantage of your product over what is available, which is obviously normally pretty easy to prove, or just generally that it is in the best interest of the patients that your product be available. We have submitted 3 of these, and we have gotten 3 issued to us. I have seen other people talk about how you need to have clinical evidence before you submit your BDD, and I disagree completely. I say that because you don't have to have, and they don't want to see all of your clinical evidence when you are in this stage. So if you can get a BDD based on your concepts and your designs, then you get moved to the top of the list for all of your clinical trials and all of your other submissions going down the road. So this is a very effective way of shortening your time frame that it takes to get to market in the US. EUA, as I said, they exist, but I would not hang your hat on them at this point, not even for masks or any of those other things right now. Q submissions, they cover several different things. The most common is the pre-submission. We do a lot of those, and that relates to trying to get in front of the FDA to ask very specific questions before you submit your 510K or something else. Submission issue requests, that has to do with if you're already in a review process and the FDA has asked questions that require extensive review, then you go through this process to get there. There's also study risk determination and informational meetings. Study risk determination is important for clinical trials and some of those things. And then informational meetings, in my opinion, there's not a whole lot of value in them. That's basically a one-way push of information where you say, hey, FDA, I want you to know this. And then you can reference it later, and in theory, they know it. But I have not done a whole lot of those. There is an extensive guidance document that tells you what you need to have in there. You can do in-person or teleconference. I have done both. I have found little value, honestly, in going to Washington, D.C. and paying a lot of money for travel and for hotel rooms. I have gotten the same response from teleconferences. So the only exception I would say is if there's something that you need the FDA to touch and feel and try. And even that, it will be debatable if they'll even do that. So the pre-submission process is very valuable if you follow the rules, so to speak. The FDA intends to stand behind its decision. If you come in and say, I want to do these 5 tests, and here is my acceptance criteria, do you think that these results would be sufficient for you to evaluate substantial equivalence in a 510K in the future? And if the FDA says yes, then when you go to submit your 510K, you submit just those 5 tests. In theory, the FDA will not ask for any additional tests unless the results of one of them cause them problems or concern. If the results cause concern, then they will possibly ask for more tests. We have only had one instance where the FDA has not completely stuck by what they said. And I will say that instance, the time difference between the pre-sub and the submission was 4 years, and so technology had changed. So the FDA had additional concerns that it didn't have 4 years ago. But all of our other submissions, the FDA has agreed and has stuck with what they agreed to. We have probably done, I would guess, 75 of these, maybe more. We have at least one meeting with the FDA each month. Sometimes we will have 4 or 5 in a week. This is a very good way to get in front of the FDA and in front of the right people at the FDA. Saves you a lot of time. You do get feedback before you spend money on testing. So that helps not only with your timeline, but it also helps with your budget. It is important that, let me see. It's important that you specifically, that you ask specific questions. Please don't submit something to the FDA with a question like, what do you think? Or, is this a good product? Those types of questions, there's no value in them. You need to ask specific questions about specific data. About 3 to 5 days before the meeting, the FDA will provide you with written feedback. At that point, if they gave you enough information, you can say, okay, well, we don't need to meet, or you can meet and you can ask questions, and then the sponsor, you, are responsible for providing the meeting minutes. And the meeting minutes are an official document that the FDA agrees to that says this is contractually what we have agreed to move forward with. I have seen some pre-submission failures that I would like to just point out some do's and don'ts. Please be clear and concise. They don't want to see all of your test data. The submission should not be 700 pages. It should be very clear that these are the specific questions. Give them only the background that they need to answer your questions. This is not a marketing opportunity for you to talk about how great your product is. Clearly identify your possible dates, your constraints, and what kind of meeting you want to have. If they receive a submission request and it doesn't say that they want a video meeting, they put it on hold. And then they email you and they ask you what kind of meeting you want to have. And now you've just delayed your whole project by several days for communication. Provide slides to the FDA at least 2 days before the meeting if you need to. That gives them an opportunity to have answers put together. And then, so another issue is if you have an active 510K and you submit your issue request within the first 60 days after receiving that deficiency, then they will get you in to see them within 21 days. If you do not submit your request within 60 days of that deficiency, they assume you're not in a hurry, and they put you on the 70-day list. I have recently run into a problem with this where the 510K got canceled while the client was waiting for a meeting with the FDA. And the FDA said, listen, you didn't submit this request within 60 days of deficiencies. We assumed that you didn't care. Sorry. So that client now has to pay $12,000 or $15,000 to submit a new 510K because they did not get to the FDA with their questions soon enough. So this can be a big mistake. And I complained all the way up to the branch chief and further up, and the response that I got was, your client was not in a hurry, so neither are we. The don'ts, I think we've covered this a little bit. Don't ask open general questions. Don't expect them to do the work for you. They're not going to design your study plan. They're not going to design your test plan. You have to present that plan, and they have to give it a yes or a no with some comments. But don't come in and say, how should I test my device? You're not going to get an answer from them. Another personal issue that I've seen is I run into the problem where clients try to tell the FDA that they are wrong. And this takes you down a very, very hard path because now the FDA does not see you as someone they want to partner with. They see you as somebody that they want to argue with. And you will not win. So the best thing to do is to look at the opportunity as a partnership with the FDA. Don't look at it as a conflict. The Safer Technologies program called STEP. STEP is very similar to BDD. The only difference is it does not have the requirement that it be life-threatening and debilitating. This is a program that they tried to put in place that's not as hard to reach as BDD. The most important part is they want to know how you're going to improve and how you're going to make the treatment better with your device. This is, like I said, a little bit easier to get. It has the same benefits. You move to the top of the list. And moving to the top of the list can mean the difference between getting funding and not getting funding if you're a startup company. The other thing about both the STEP and the BDD is if you are issued a BDD or STEP number or you are granted that designation, you can advertise that. You can put on your website, we have received the BDD. And that can lead to additional investment, or that can lead to comfort from your current investors that you have a good path forward. So there is a lot of benefit for those of you who are looking for investment. Again, the STEP program, it's about reducing failures, about reducing pain. It is an easier program, and there is the same value to it. Safety and performance-based pathway. This was the FDA's way to try to get around the predicate device requirements. So for spinal plates, for example, they said if you can make your device out of this material and your mechanical testing can come in at this level, then you don't need a predicate device for those parts of your product. You can submit what's called an abbreviated 510K. Don't get excited. There's actually no difference in timeline. I don't know why they call it that. But it is a much easier pathway. You do not have to have predicate devices. And that can save you a lot of time and money. They are continuing to add devices to this. So they go and they look at their database of thousands of products, and they say, okay, well, here's the average, and here's what we have accepted in the past, so this is the limit that we're going to place. And that allows you to just go straight to that document, do that testing, and go to 510K without having to deal with acquiring predicate devices, for example. This is the list of things that they currently have available. They just added the surgical sutures and the facet screw systems in the last few months. So we have already transitioned to moving to using those for our submissions as well. And our submissions have gone through faster. Our submissions generally average about 120 days, total calendar days, to clearance. These are running more in the 95-day range, so it saves a couple weeks. These are, again, it's more information about the safety and performance pathway. The best thing to do is to go to the website for the FDA and look at the guidance documents, because they do change almost on a monthly basis. This table comes right out of the guidance document. It tells you how you decide what documentation you need in the abbreviated submission to get a faster clearance. E-Star submission. Again, this is a smart PDF, and I put that in quotation marks because I don't find it smart, but that's what they call it. It's a very easy system if you are the only person who's working on the project. We struggle with it because we work cooperatively with our clients. We have a shared cloud folder, and we work on the document together, and we use track changes, and we add comments. None of that is possible with the E-Star submission. But if you were just going to sit down and write a submission, it guides you through what you need. It will take a little bit of practice to get used to it. The benefit is you can submit online without having to mail anything, and you skip the refuse to accept process. So they have this process where they look at your submission when they receive it, and they make sure it has all of the elements it's supposed to have, and if it doesn't, then they stop the review and they make you make changes. If you submit with E-Star, they don't do an RTA review. It goes straight into submission. So just using E-Star saves you about 10 days. There are two templates. There's an IVD E-Star template and a non-IVD E-Star. It is not available for anything other than medical devices and IVD at this point. They are moving and they're expanding the program, but right now those are the two that are available. We've used them both. They're very similar. There's nothing really different between them other than some of the questions that get asked lead you down a different smart path. And then you submit through the customer portal. The other advantage of the customer portal, we piloted with the FDA, but it is now public and available for everybody. You can go at any time and see where you are in the review process. It tells you the deadlines that they're going to meet and when you can expect to have clearance. Just in conclusion, right now there are a lot of changes at the FDA. They have received a mandate to make it easier to get new products into the US market. We recognize, we being the US, we recognize that it used to be much easier to get into Europe than it was to get into the US. And because of that, our country was not getting good technology. And we have made a conscious decision to flip that. It just so happens that we did that at the same time that MDR became hard and the EU became hard. But I can tell you, having done this now for nearly 30 years, it is so much easier to get into the US market now than it ever has been. And there are so many modifications being made on a weekly basis to make it easier. We participate, Empirical participates in town hall meetings with the FDA several times a year. And we actually train the FDA on various aspects of good methods for evaluating devices. And the reason we have chosen to participate and to spend the time and the money to do that is because we recognize that our goal is to make things easier for the small company and to make it better for the US patients. The FDA is listening. Even through different presidential administrations, they are making strides to be better. So if you can, go to the FDA website and sign up for their email updates. You'll get an email about once a week, and it will tell you what new things are happening, what new guidance documents are available, what meetings are happening. They have free webinars. They have free training that can be 3 and 4 days and teaching you how to get your device into the market. They have all of these options that are available now, and I would highly recommend that you learn more about them and get involved as well. And then one last thing that I have tried to tell everybody my whole life is be professional and be honest whenever you're dealing with the FDA. You will never get very far if you are not those two things. They are on your side, just as much as Sanex, Empirical, we're on your side. The FDA wants you to have your product in the market. And if you treat them poorly, then they will treat you poorly. So thank you again very much for the time. And if you need me, please reach out to Sanex, and they can put us in touch, and I'd be glad to talk to anybody who needs help. Thank you.